We have been tracing out biblical history, biblical chronology, using Dr. Wilmington's basic stages in the Book of Ages. So he has given us the creation stage, the patriarchal stage, the Exodus stage, the conquest stage, the judges stage, the United Kingdom stage under David and Saul and David and Solomon. And now we come to the point of the divided kingdom. Dr. Wilmington called it the chaotic kingdom stage. And the reason for that was during this time, there is a lot of fluctuation, a lot of change, a lot of not only disobedience to God, but walking away, a lot of idolatry, a lot of change that caused eventual captivity in both the northern and the southern kingdom. So let's talk about how the divided kingdom came about. Solomon's son, you remember Solomon near the end of his life, we said that he was drawn away from God based on his relationships with his wives. His wives were political alliances, but he did love them, and as a result, he wanted to make them happy, and they drew him away from wholehearted following of God. And so God in judgment said, I'm going to tear away the kingdom from you. I will preserve it because of David, but it will be broken apart. And so Rehoboam, Solomon's son, comes to the throne and he is responsible for dividing the nation of Israel into two parts. When he takes the throne, Solomon's advisors, the older generation, say to Rehoboam, here's how you make your throne secure. Because of the way that Solomon ruled and the things that he built and the things he did to build the nation of Israel, the taxes on the people were quite heavy. And so Solomon's advisors told the young king, back off from that heaviness of taxes, and you will win the hearts of the people, and your throne will be secure. And Rehoboam said, okay, I'll think about it. But then he goes and talks to the advisors that he has for himself from his own generation, and they say, no, don't you even think about going down that trail, because people will see you as weak. So you should say to them, my father's taxes are just the beginning of what we're going to do, and you rule by force, and that's the way to make your throne secure. As a result, the nation split in half. One of the servants in the royal household, Jeroboam, leads 10 tribes away, and Rehoboam, the authentic, legitimate line of David, gets 2 tribes. And so from here on out, whenever you read in biblical history about Israel during the divided kingdom stage, Israel means the 10 northern tribes. Judah, the major tribe that remained faithful to the house of David, Judah is used for the meaning of the southern kingdom. All right, so you have Israel in the north, the 10 tribes, ruling under or ruled by Jeroboam, and you have Judah in the south, faithful to David, uh, legitimate Davidic line, and yet only really 2 tribes. The northern kingdom, then, those tribes that move out, have no place with David, with Judah, um, immediately begin to see some apostasy happening. Jeroboam decides, you know what? I can't make a secure kingdom if my people several times a year have to travel to the neighboring nation in order to worship God. So what he does is he builds another center of worship in the northern kingdom so that they do not have to travel and they do not have to cross down into the other nation, and be reminded that they were once one country. So he moves the place of worship up into the northern kingdom. As a result, this northern kingdom, when you trace the line in the succession of kings down to their captivity, never do they have a godly king. So if you can recall in your own Bible studies any godly kings during this period, you know that they are kings of Judah, because the kings of Israel, while perhaps competent, efficient in their rulership, were never godly kings. They had their own personal agenda, and they led those 10 tribes away from God and into captivity. Captivity for the northern kingdom did come in 722 or 721 in the fall to Assyria. Assyria invaded, the northern kingdom falls. They got very close to taking the southern kingdom as well, but the nation was, Judah was delivered through the efforts of Hezekiah. Now note this date real quick, 722, 721. It doesn't mean that historians have it narrowed down to 2 possible years when the fall to Assyria happened. What it means is the years were counted not from our January to January, but so because of that, the fall happens in what we would describe as 722 or 721. So this is the northern kingdom. It falls early, about 100 to 140 years. It falls to Assyria. Now let's talk about the south for a minute. The north, 10 tribes go into captivity in 721. The southern kingdom continues the house and the line of David from Rehoboam to kings after that. Occasionally, only occasionally, bummer for Judah, do they ever have a godly king. It is Hezekiah that faces that same Assyrian crisis that Israel did when Assyria comes down to attack God's people. He takes the 10 tribes of the north, destroys that nation, and then tries to destroy the south. But we read in Isaiah what happened during the reign of Hezekiah and how the Assyrian threat was brought to nothing. The nation of Judah continues on, but like its other sister, will eventually have turned away from God in such a manner that God brings judgment, this time in 586, and this time from not Assyria, but Babylon. And we're going to talk about these nations and what their role was in the invasion of Israel. So the divided kingdom goes from Rehoboam. 10 tribes divide. They go into captivity in 721. 2 tribes remain faithful to the house of David, sometimes faithful to God, and as a result, they're able to prolong their independence, but they too fall to Babylon, not Assyria, in 586 BC. During the divided kingdom stage, during this chaotic kingdom stage, as Dr. Wilmington describes it, there are chaotic relationships between the king, between the prophets, and between the people. And that is often described by the writers of the Kings and the Chronicles as their kings were either walking in the ways of their father David, or they are not walking in the ways of their father David. David is the gold standard by which kings would reign and be compared in terms of their actual success in ruling. Kings would often get court prophets. We see that when we read the story of Ahab and Micaiah, and you see that there sometimes kings would gather around themselves prophets, but they were really yes men prophets. They would just choose what they considered best for themselves, and the prophets would go king, rather than really trying to tell the king what God had said. And so the king is often drawn away by these court prophets. You notice as well during this time, one of the saddest parts, it is a revival under Josiah, but when you realize that the temple has been shut down, has been converted into some storehouse in which junk has been stored, and a godly king like Josiah comes along and begins to try to clean the temple out again, which means worship of God had stopped in Judah. So much so that when they find the law, Josiah finds out what real trouble they're in because of their ongoing idolatry. Sometimes it's Baal, sometimes it's Marduk, um, sometimes it's some other god, but they have a temptation over and over and over again to walk away from Israel, to have their own gods, household gods to hold on to and to worship. Um, what is cool about this chaotic kingdom period is every once in a while, like I mentioned with Josiah, you get a picture of what national or corporate revival would look like, and it always begins with the ascension of a godly king. So when we're taught to pray for our leaders, there's a real cash value to that, because if God gives us good leaders, then we have a much closer opportunity as a nation to walk in the ways of David in following God in obedience and prolonging the prosperity, prolonging the freedom that comes with a nation. So those are the prophets and kings. Watch as you read through the chaotic kingdom, the divided kingdom period. Watch, because you get a chance to see prophets are valued when the king wants to hear from God. The prophets go through a great persecution when the king does not want to hear from God, or when the people have strayed. It's interesting to watch when fire falls under Elijah. Not only is the king and queen bested, but you hear the people shout, "The Lord, He is God," as if it hadn't dawned on them previously that He could be the real God. So this time of the divided kingdom period really is sad, because these are God's people. And yet every once in a while we do get a picture of what revival would look like. Thanks for hanging out.